I wasn't planning on stopping by Ivy's house that evening. My shift at the pediatric clinic had drained me. I'd spent 10 hours on my feet, comforting sick kids and assuring anxious parents, and all I could think of was sinking into a hot bath and letting my bones relax. But as I turned onto Sycamore Drive, something pulled at me, a strange tug in my chest. Call it gut instinct, sister's intuition, or that quiet whisper that had been nagging at me for weeks. Something's wrong. Ivy and I used to be inseparable. As kids, we shared everything: bedtime secrets, closets, even crushes. But after her divorce last year, she'd grown distant, guarded. I chalked it up to grief, the kind that strips you bare and leaves you afraid to let anyone back in. Still, I tried. I called, I texted, I offered to visit. She always declined, her voice light but empty. That day, I turned the steering wheel on impulse and drove toward her place. I expected nothing. A quick check-in, a sisterly hug, maybe some tea and awkward small talk. Instead, I found my husband's car in her driveway. I slammed the brakes halfway down the street, my pulse roaring in my ears. I blinked twice, sure I was mistaken. But no, there was the dent on the rear bumper, the college football sticker he refused to peel off, and his ID badge still dangling from the mirror. What was Mason doing here? He had called me less than an hour ago saying he was at a client meeting across town, swamped with reports, would be home late. But his car, his filthy, unmistakable Mason car, was parked in front of my sister's house. I parked 3 houses down and stepped out, trembling. I told myself, maybe he's dropping something off, helping her fix the heater. Something innocent. Please, something innocent. I crept along the sidewalk, heart jackhammering inside my chest. Ivy's living room window faced the street. The curtains were half drawn. I crouched below it, bracing my hand against the brick. That's when I heard it. Laughter. Ivy's laugh, followed by Mason's low chuckle. She has no idea, Ivy said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Honestly, I don't think she ever will.
Mason laughed again, more softly this time. She's too trusting, he said. That's what makes it so easy. I froze. Easy? I pressed my back against the wall, hands gripping the rough edge of the windowsill to keep myself upright. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to hear more, but I couldn't stop. Ivy's voice came again. I almost feel bad, but like you said, she's not exciting. She's comfortable. Comfortable, Mason echoed, like a pair of old shoes. The shame that flooded me was immediate and paralyzing. I clutched my shirt, twisting the fabric until my knuckles burned. My chest rose and fell in shallow gulps. I should have burst through the front door. I should have screamed, thrown something, demanded answers. But I didn't. I couldn't. I walked away. Not out of cowardice, out of necessity. I needed to survive the moment. I needed to think. I drove home like a ghost in my own body. When I pulled into the driveway, everything looked the same. The porch light flickered like always, the begonias wilted under the July heat, and our dog Winston barked from the backyard. But everything had changed. Inside the house, I sat alone in the dark. I listened to the ticking clock, and the silence between each tick said, "They betrayed you." The next morning, Mason walked into the kitchen, yawning, and asked if I wanted coffee. I smiled. "Sure. How was your meeting last night?" He kissed my cheek and said, "Long, boring, numbers and projections." Liar. And that's when I decided. I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. I needed the truth to land like a thunderclap. And when it did, it would be loud.
The night after I overheard them, I didn't sleep. Mason lay beside me, snoring gently, blissfully unaware that I was wide awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. How long? That question replayed in my mind like a broken record. How long had I been living with strangers? How long had my husband been sleeping in my bed while lying to my face? How long had Ivy, the girl who once braided my hair and cried on my shoulder, been stabbing me in the back? I replayed every conversation, every laugh, every strange silence, and suddenly the past made horrifying sense. 2 weeks ago, Mason had come home late, again. Traffic, he said, rolling his shoulders as he unknotted his tie. I teased him, calling him Mr. Overtime, then handed him a reheated plate of dinner. He kissed my forehead and said, "You spoil me." I thought it was love. Now I realized it was guilt. Then there was Ivy. She'd been dodging me for months, canceling plans, always too busy, too tired. I'd invited her for brunch just last month. She declined, saying she had a migraine. But that afternoon, Mason had been gone longer than usual. When he came back, I noticed something odd. He was jittery, restless. When I asked, "Rough day?" he mumbled, "Just errands." I'd laughed. "You look like you've seen a ghost." He had. It was me. The worst part wasn't that they had done it. It was that I had trusted them so deeply, I never even considered the possibility. I gave them every benefit of the doubt. I made excuses for them. I defended them, even when their actions didn't make sense. Now it was all crashing down. And yet, I didn't cry. Not at first. I didn't scream. I didn't shatter plates or tear photographs. I became quiet, but not passive. I became observant.
I started studying them the way a scientist studies a specimen under a microscope. I noticed every pause, every glance, every time Ivy avoided eye contact, every time Mason's stories got a little too vague. And I waited. One night, Mason left his phone on the nightstand while he showered. I never used to snoop. I believed in privacy, in trust. But trust had left the building the moment I crouched beneath my sister's window. I picked up the phone. Most of the messages were clean, boring even. Work group chats, soccer league updates, grocery lists. But then I saw a name I didn't recognize. E. Just the letter. There were no full threads. He had deleted most of the messages. But one line remained. "She'll never see it coming. I almost feel guilty." To which E replied, "Almost." I didn't need a signature to know who E was. That same week, I followed Ivy after she told our mom she was heading to the pharmacy. I stayed far behind, 2 cars back, like something out of a movie. She drove past the pharmacy, past the grocery store, past everything. And then she turned into a parking lot of a cheap motel off the highway. 10 minutes later, Mason's car pulled in. I sat across the street, gripping the steering wheel until my fingers ached. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was fact. And facts are powerful things. In the days that followed, I collected evidence like I was building a case. Photos, screenshots, timeline entries. I created a hidden folder on a USB drive and emailed a copy to myself, just in case. And while I did all that, I played the role of a lifetime. The loving wife, the trusting sister, the sweet daughter.
I laughed at their jokes. I brought Mason coffee in bed. I helped Ivy pick paint swatches for her apartment. No one suspected a thing. I wore the same smile I had worn all these years. But behind my eyes, the fire was growing. Then came the call from my mother. She said, Darling, this might be nothing, but has Mason seemed different to you? I swallowed hard. Different how? I don't know, she said, hesitant. It's probably silly, but sometimes I feel like Ivy's, I don't know, too close to him. It gives me a strange feeling. A strange feeling. A mother's instinct, she said she couldn't explain. But she hadn't said anything before. She hadn't warned me. I hung up the phone and walked to the bathroom. I turned on the shower, locked the door, and sat on the tiled floor, still dressed. And I wept. Not for what they did, but because I felt stupid. Because I had loved them. Because I had trusted the wrong people. But that was the last time I cried over them. Because I had cried enough. They thought they were clever, that I would never notice, that I would keep folding laundry and smiling at family brunches. They were wrong. I met with a lawyer named Elise. She wore black-rimmed glasses, spoke softly, and took notes while I poured everything out. The affair, the lies, the motel, the messages. She listened. Then she said something that anchored me. You're not powerless, Nora. You're ahead. Nora. That's me. Not Claire anymore. Nora. The woman they underestimated. And I was done playing the fool.
By the time my birthday came around, I wasn't sad anymore. I was ready. I had spent the last few weeks preparing with Elise, my lawyer, my lifeline. I'd shifted my paychecks into a new bank account. I quietly withdrew from our shared finances, leaving Mason unaware. The house we lived in, it had always been in my name, inherited from my grandfather. Mason never thought to ask. I protected what mattered. But more than money, I protected my mind. I began to look at things clearly. Every glance, every whisper, every phony moment dressed up as family love. And now, as I stood in front of my mirror on the evening of my birthday, putting on a deep blue dress and sliding a ring onto my finger, I wasn't preparing for a party. I was preparing for war. Dinner was at my mother's house. Ivy had sent me a message that morning with a ridiculous number of heart emojis and a nauseating, "Love you, sis. I'm kink pink heart heart." I almost laughed. Mason had been acting strange all day, pacing around, making calls outside, checking his phone obsessively. He tried to play it off as nerves about a surprise. I played along. At Mom's house, the decorations were sweet. Streamers in gold and silver, candles flickering on the table, a big white cake with my name piped in purple frosting. Everyone smiled and laughed, but I could feel it. The tension, the show, the setup. Mason stood behind me with his hand on my shoulder, like he was claiming something. Ivy flitted around the table, her glow a little too bright, her dress a little too tight. Something was coming, and I was ready. Dinner passed with fake smiles and shallow toasts. Dessert was being served when Ivy stood up and tapped her glass with a fork. The room quieted. "I have an announcement," she said, placing one hand over her stomach. I didn't blink. "I'm pregnant," she said softly, glancing once, just once, toward Mason. The room fell still. Someone gasped. My uncle dropped his fork. She smiled wider. It wasn't planned, but sometimes life gives you surprises. And we're going to face this as a family. Mason stood frozen behind me. He hadn't expected her to say it, not like this, not tonight. I stood up. "Congratulations," I said, raising my glass, "to both of you." Gasps rippled around the room like a wave. Ivy's smile faltered. Mason turned pale. I reached into my purse and pulled out a slim white envelope. "I actually have a little something for you, Ivy." She hesitated. "What is this?" "Just a gift," I said. She opened it. Her eyes skimmed the paper inside, and then her face collapsed. The silence broke like glass. It was a DNA report. Mason's DNA, collected from his toothbrush. Ivy's from a napkin she'd used at brunch. The test confirmed one thing. Mason couldn't be the father. He'd had a vasectomy 2 years ago, a little secret he'd never shared with Ivy. I turned to Mason. "Remember that doctor's appointment you said was just for a checkup? I made it for you. I picked up your prescription. You really thought I didn't know?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out.
Ivy looked like someone had slapped her. "I'd like to make another toast," I said, lifting my glass again. "To betrayal, to secrets, and to the best birthday gift I've ever received. The truth." I set down the glass, reached into my bag, and pulled out another envelope, this one thicker. It was addressed to Mason. Inside was a letter from Elise, outlining the full dissolution of our joint assets. The house being sold, the savings account emptied, the car reclaimed. He had nothing. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered, sliding the envelope across the table. Mason stared at the paper like it was written in fire. Ivy just stood there, trembling. "You wanted to take my life?" I said, my voice steady. "Fine. You can have the ashes." I picked up my purse and turned to the table of shocked relatives. "Don't wait up," I said. And I walked out the front door. Not a single tear, not a single look back. 6 months had passed since that unforgettable birthday dinner. People still whispered about it at family gatherings. Some praised me, others looked away, unsure where to place their loyalties. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't living for their approval. I was living for me. Mason tried everything. He called, he showed up at my office, he emailed long, self-pitying letters claiming he had been manipulated by Ivy, that he had made a mistake, that he still loved me. I never answered. I had spent years being invisible in my own marriage. His comfort, his constant, his convenience. He mistook my silence for weakness. But silence is often the loudest answer, and mine echoed with finality. Ivy, on the other hand, disappeared into shame. The moment the DNA results came out, her reputation disintegrated. She had lied to everyone, including the actual father, a married man who wanted nothing to do with her once the truth emerged. No one wanted to be near the fire she started. She tried to apologize once. She sent me a message. "I miss you, sis. I messed up. But I was hurting too." I didn't respond. She wasn't hurting when she crawled into bed with my husband. She was hurting now, and it was her own doing. Life had become quiet, but in the most beautiful way. I redecorated the house, painted the walls in warm tones, adopted a cat, started yoga, drank coffee on the porch in silence. For the first time in my adult life, I made decisions with no one else's opinion weighing me down. I took a sabbatical from work and traveled to Lisbon, then to Kyoto. I stood under cherry blossoms and watched strangers fall in love with life. And slowly,
I fell in love again, too, with myself. The woman in the mirror wasn't broken anymore. She was radiant.
Elise, the lawyer who'd helped me so selflessly, became one of my dearest friends. She introduced me to her circle of independent women, writers, artists, entrepreneurs. They didn't ask me what happened. They just welcomed me in. They reminded me that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering your worth. One autumn afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Just my name. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Familiar scrawl. It was from Mason. You were always the stronger one. I see that now. I destroyed the best thing I ever had. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. You were never invisible. I saw you. I just didn't know how to love you the way you deserved. I sat there for a while. Not crying, not angry, just still. Because the truth is, I had needed to hear that. Not for him, for me. But I didn't reply. I folded the letter, slipped it into a drawer, and closed it. Some things are better left unsaid. The following spring, I stood under a canopy of blooming dogwoods, dressed in soft ivory, holding the hand of someone new. Someone kind, someone real. He wasn't flashy, he didn't make grand speeches, but he saw me, truly saw me, and loved me for everything I was, scars and all. As we exchanged vows, my eyes caught Elise's in the front row. She smiled, and I knew. My story didn't end in betrayal, it began there. Because sometimes losing everything you thought you needed is the only way to find the life you were meant to live.